Episode 168 of CppCast with guest Bryce Adelstein Lelbach, recorded September 13th, 2018. Today's sponsor of CppCast is the PVS Studio team. PVS Studio can be considered both as a tool for finding errors and typos and a static application security testing tool. The tool supports the analysis of C, C++, and C# code. In this episode, we discuss parallel algorithms and lightning talks. Then we talk to Bryce Adelstein Lelbach. Bryce talks to us about his role preparing for CppCon and more. Welcome to episode 168 of CppCast, the first podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
Pretty good, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Assuming this storm doesn't, nail us here in North Carolina, but we'll find out soon.
Yeah, last I looked, it looked like it was going to land right at the border of North and South Carolina, but you're fairly far inland anyhow, right?
I'm fairly far inland. It does look like it's going to kind of curve south, head more towards South Carolina, and then curve back up north, so it's probably going to be dropping rain on us for several days.
Follow the Appalachians after it makes landfall, perhaps?
It kind of looks like that, yeah.
It's just, taking the Appalachian Trail is like a big deal. A lot of people do it. The hurricane felt like it was missing out. It's going to aim for that, I think, yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. How about you, though? This is our last week before CppCon. Are you ready?
I think so. And this is going to air, 2 days before the conference? 3 days before the conference starts?
Yeah.
So I thought I would give a quick sneak peek, because I gave a little bit of a teaser. I just said I'm having a hard time not talking about one of my talks.
Okay.
On Friday, I will be giving a talk called Applied Best Practices, and the concept is, if you start a project from scratch and try to do all the best practices that I teach, what happens, basically? Is it really possible? Do they get in your way? Whatever. And at the end of this, I am going to demo the project that I have started from scratch, which the goal of this project, see if I can get this phrasing right, is to make learning and experimenting with C++ as easy and as fun as programming BASIC on the Commodore 64.
Okay, that's a nice tease. Looking forward to seeing what that project is exactly.
I've been having a lot of fun working on it. Hopefully, the audience will have some fun with it too.
Okay, sounds great. We'll look forward to seeing your talks in just over a week, Jason.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, well, at the top of the episode, I'd like to read a piece of feedback. This week, we got an email from Joshua, and he writes in, I would love to hear an episode on the current state of ASM.js and or WebAssembly compilers and their support for the latest C++ features. I'm mostly a C++ native developer, but I have a background in web development and can think of a large number of web products that would benefit from the somewhat theoretical near-native performance of these technologies. Also, thoroughly enjoy the podcast and wish you both much success. Thanks for the email, Joshua. I completely agree. It's been way too long since we first talked about WebAssembly with JF Bastian, over 2 years ago. Long time ago. Yeah. When I got this email, I actually saw that there was a speaker giving a WebAssembly talk at CppCon, and I think we're going to have him a couple of weeks after the conference on the show.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show as well. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com, and don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. Joining us again today is Bryce Lelbach. Bryce is a software engineer on the CUDA driver team at NVIDIA. Bryce is passionate about parallel programming. He maintains Thrust, the CUDA C++ core library. He's also one of the initial developers of the HPX C++ runtime system. He spent 5 years working on HPX while he was at Louisiana State University's Center for Computation and Technology, and 3 years at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. developing and analyzing new parallel programming models for exascale and post-Moore architecture. He also helped start the LLVM Linux initiative and has occasionally contributed to the Boost C++ libraries. Bryce is an organizer for the C++ Now and CppCon conferences, as well as the Bay Area C++ user group, and he is passionate about C++ community development. He is a member of the ISO C++ Standard Committee. He worked on the C++ 17 parallel algorithms. Today, he works on standardizing better futures, executors, and multi-dimensional arrays. Bryce, welcome back to the show.
Hey guys, it's great to be back.
That might be the longest bio we've had.
Perhaps I should trim it a little bit.
No, you're a busy man. You got to put all that in there.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like I know you well enough that I can say that, so, I do actually want to call out, I'm curious about the LLVM Linux initiative. I do not recall talking with you about this in the past. I assume that's about getting the Linux kernel to compile with Clang. Is that what that's related to?
That's right. Back at the very dawn of my career, when I was a newly minted college dropout, I was like, I got a bunch of free time. What should I do? I know. I'll take this new Clang compiler thing. This was like in 2010, so it was relatively. It was not as big as it was today, and I'll get the Linux kernel to compile with it. And to be honest, I didn't do most of the work here. The people in the LLVM community did most of the work. I just sort of did the last mile of getting things going and showing the proof of concept and compiling the first Clang-built Linux kernel. And I haven't been very involved in the project since then. I sort of helped get it off the ground, and there are a bunch of other people who have worked on it over the years. And there's a number of different companies and distros that have an interest in this. I'm not sure all who's using it today, and there's still work ongoing with it. But it's a pretty cool project. The idea is to have another stack that's an alternative to the traditional GCC stack to build the kernel. And it's always nice to have options.
That's interesting because I don't know, in the past maybe couple months read an old contemporaneous comment from Linus that said something like, if LLVM or if Clang wants to support the Linux kernel, it has to support the dialect of C that we write in. Like, it's not standard ISO C or whatever that they write in. That's, I don't know. Is it like a standard flag switch on Clang? You can be like C++ 98, C++ 98 or C99 or like Linux C or something like that.
So the answer is that it actually is. Have you ever used with, like, say, the GCC compiler, one of the stood options, which is like GNU GNU plus 2A or a mode like that, as opposed to
where it has the extensions, yeah.
Yeah. So that's really what it's about. And to get the Linux kernel compiling, you had to get all of the GCC extensions working in Clang, with only a couple exceptions, like variable length arrays and structs, which is a GCC extension that's a feature that the Clang and LLVM community decided they did not want to implement because it's very difficult to do so, and you have to really go through a lot of loops to do so. And so for the most part, Clang implements all these extensions. There's a couple that aren't implemented. And a lot of the work was figuring out what to do in the code base to deal with those. But I mean, I think what Linus said is right. The Linux kernel has its own sort of special dialect of C, which has been for many years, this contract between the GCC developers and the Linux developers. And the Linux has its own memory model, and it's not just like regular C code, right? It's very different than in some ways than your sort of traditional C project that's not a kernel.
Now I'm even more curious, because a variable length array inside a struct, that sounds nonsensical. Like, you could never know the size of the struct.
Yes. You sort of have to insert some runtime code to the compiler has to insert some code to figure that out dynamically.
Wow.
Yeah. Like it makes it unclear what sort of the size of your type is.
Yes, I don't like that. It makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Now, okay, I'm sorry, but one other thing. Since you just kind of made this comment that I wasn't aware of, you said something, you were a newly minted college dropout.
Yes, that's right. I originally started college at some small liberal arts college in upstate New York, and it did not work out well. There just wasn't a good fit, and I sort of discovered the Boost community on IRC, and a short time after I dropped out, I met my mentor, Hartmut Kaiser, who we were both working on Boost Spirit. And one day I was just like on IRC, I was like, hey, I'm looking for a job. And he's like, why don't you come down to Louisiana? And a month later, I was in Louisiana.
And then you went to school there.
Yeah, so I worked at the research center there for about 6 months or so. And then Hartmut's like, you should really get a college degree. And then I did that.
That's funny. Okay.
That's great. Okay, well, Bryce, we got a couple of news articles to discuss. Feel free to comment on any of these, and then we'll start talking to you more about CppCon and CUDA and everything else you're involved with, okay?
Cool. Sounds great.
Okay, so this first one is a crash course in Qt for C++ developers. And I thought this was really useful. It's on cleanqt.io, and I think that's only the first 3 parts are done so far. But it looks like a good, entry-level course for someone who wants to start making Qt programs and doesn't really know where to start.
And I noticed you properly said Qt every single time you said it.
I had to think about that. I did. I trained myself a couple times before getting on the show today. I'm like, Qt, not QT, Qt. Yeah.
Well, and I think for clarity for our listeners, if you actually want to go to the website, that is CLEANQT.io.
Yes. Which is what makes it all so confusing.
Yes.
But yeah, is there anything else you want to say about this? Yeah.
Besides call out your, no. My only comment that I thought was like maybe a little bit missing is I feel like having to use the mock preprocessor is kind of essential to how Qt works, and I don't see any mention of it in the intro thing, and I don't know. I guess you're just starting with a Q application. You don't have any signals or slots or anything, so there's nothing that for mock that mock needs to do there. But
well, so this is just part 1, and part 2 is actually meta object system, including QObject and mock. So that probably covers what you're talking about.
That would cover it, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Right.
Bryce, are you familiar with Qt at all?
I'm a little bit familiar with Qt. I had thought, isn't there some ongoing work to supplant the mock compiler? I thought there was some on.
Not from Qt. Not from who currently owns Qt. I almost said Trolltech.
Are you referring to CopperSpice because they have their own version that doesn't include mock? Is that what we're talking about?
No, I had thought I know about CopperSpice, but I had thought that there was some work within the Qt community, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Okay.
I don't know. I haven't heard anything like that.
Yeah, but it's always good to see more Qt content. Every time I hear anybody talking about building a graphical user interface in C++, Qt really seems to be the de facto go-to thing if you want to do something that's cross-platform.
Yeah, it's one of the main couple of real choices that exists.
Okay, next article we have is a post from the Visual C++ team blog. And this is another post from, I guess, a fairly new series they're doing where they're just kind of answering questions and having, guest authors on the blog. And this one is all about using parallel algorithms. And, I thought this might be a good one for you, Bryce. Thought it would be a good, obviously you know a lot about parallel algorithms, but I thought it was a good intro into them, at least from the Microsoft perspective.
Yeah, I took a look at the article. I thought it was a very good article. It sort of it spoke to the users that I think are sort of the main people that I expect to get something out of the parallel algorithms. So the library I work on, Thrust, is sort of the progenitor of the C++ 17 parallel algorithms. It has, an STL-like algorithms library with algorithms like sort and reduce, etc. And it's not the right thing for everybody's use case, but if you just need to write a parallel sort or a parallel reduction with just minimal effort, you don't want to spend a bunch of time doing it. Something like the parallel algorithms is great for that, and you can get maybe not absolute best in class performance, but you can get pretty good performance with a good implementation of them.
And if you've been following Billy for the last couple of years on Twitter, he has tweeted a lot about the pains that he has gone to in implementing these, I believe, from the Visual Studio perspective. Yeah. I also find it interesting because I don't think libc++ or libstd++ are shipping with parallel algorithms yet.
That's right. So there was recently a thread on the LLVM, on the Clang developers list about this. About a year ago or so, Intel announced that they have a parallel STL implementation, and that it's open sourced.
Offering it up, yeah.
Yeah, and so what's happened is there's interest within the libc++ and the libstd++ community for building a shared backend that both libraries can use, and that's extensible, and to base it around this initial contribution of work from Intel. And so there's recently a thread about this, and I suspect that effort will be spinning up soon. I know I get a lot of emails from people who from library developers or standard library developers who are interested in rolling out this feature because it is a part of C++ 17. So I think we'll see in due time implementations show up in libc++ and in libstd++.
Yeah, I don't want this to come across as cynical as I think it's going to sound, but I don't feel like we see the GCC and LLVM Clang communities really playing together a lot like that. So I find it's just interesting that they're talking about having a shared implementation for the parallel algorithms, and it just makes me wonder: are the algorithms that complex that it's just in everyone's best interest to share an implementation, or what?
So I think there's a few reasons why it makes sense. So I'll use an analogy. You guys are familiar probably with OpenMP, or I guess I should tell your users. OpenMP is a pragma-based mechanism for C, C++, and Fortran languages to easily add parallelism to their program. So you can put something like pragma OMP parallel 4 on a loop, and it will parallelize that loop using just some unspecified implementation provided threading runtime. Okay. One of the OpenMP runtimes that's commonly used is the Intel OpenMP runtime, which was also open sourced, and it's used by a number of different compilers. And there's a couple reasons why it gets used by multiple different compilers instead of writing their own. By everybody targeting a single interface, it means that if somebody like me, developer of HPX, wants to provide my own backend for OpenMP, I can write to one common interface and provide the customization points to that interface, instead of specializing, providing an implementation of the interface for the Clang OpenMP runtime and the GCC OpenMP runtime and everybody's different interface. So I think there's a benefit when you suspect that there might be different backends, and backends might be provided by third-party libraries, to having a shared library core. It is also not an easy thing to implement, and I think it's, for something like parallel algorithms or file system or regex, it makes a lot of sense to me that open source standard libraries might want to share their implementations, or use a common implementation rather.
So right now, though, the regex and file system, I think, are all three separate implementations.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. And then the last article we have here is a post from the CppCon blog. It's announcing the lightning talks, and it sounds like there's a little bit of a twist to it this year. Obviously, lightning talks are short 5-minute talks that you can give in the evenings, and they're asking you to register if you're interested in giving one. But there's also the lightning challenge, which is a more gamified version of the lightning talks. Bryce, do you know any more about that?
I can't say that I know too much about that. Michael Case is the main organizer there, but yeah, this is something new that we're trying out this year.
Okay.
So it looks like if you appease the audience, you will get a longer time frame for your lightning talk if you're willing to go down that route.
Yeah, that's the basic idea. I'm not exactly sure what appease the audience is going to mean. Maybe it'll be...
It also says you can get cut off if your talk's not going well. So
yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah,
I think there's only like 5 slots open for this particular gamified version. It looks like they're starting with it very light.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, most of the lightning talks will be the traditional 5-minute lightning talks.
Yeah, it does sound like it would take just the right personality to do this. Yeah. There's a few people I can imagine who would want to try it.
Yeah. And if you are going to CppCon and thinking about maybe I want to do a lightning talk, I strongly encourage you to do so. It's a really great opportunity to sort of get into speaking without that much investment. It's only a 5-minute talk. You don't have to prepare a full hour's worth of material. It's a really rewarding experience. A lot of speakers got their start giving lightning talks. And if you are thinking about it, I encourage you to register for a slot now because those slots fill up real fast.
And you tend to give lightning talks, right? 1 or 2 at each conference that you're at?
Yeah, I usually do. I almost always do it off the cuff while I'm at the conference. So, like, I'll be at the conference and I'll be like, hey, this would be a good lightning talk. Just sort of based on conversations with people. Actually, my CppCon talk this year was a lightning talk at C++ Now that was sort of an expanded version of that, and also said slower because I was talking very quickly during my C++ Now lightning talk.
So you gave an hour presentation in 5 minutes, and now you'll be giving the same presentation in an hour?
Right, that's right.
Okay, well, since we're talking about CppCon, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what your role is at the conference this year, Bryce?
Yeah, so my main role at the conference is I'm the program chair. So my responsibility is to craft the technical program, the general program of the conference. I don't do it alone. There's a huge team of program committee members who do an amazing job reviewing the talks. We normally get 6 to 8 reviews per talk. There's also a number of people on what's sort of known as an inner program committee who help me do the second round of review. So the way the process works is in the first round, the program committee gets assigned different talks and everybody reviews all the talks and scores them. And then in the second round, a smaller group of people, myself, John Kalb, a few others, will look through those scores and look through all the talks and see if there's anything that, didn't get very good scores, but seems like it would be a very strong talk if, the abstract had been a little better, or if this had been improved, or just for whatever reason, something that fell through the holes. And then from that, we craft the program. And I do things like the category tags on all the talks in the program. I come up with what the set of categories are and assign them to the talks. That's something new that we started last year. And I usually help John and Herb figure out who some of the keynotes are going to be. Just anything related to the technical content of the program, I tend to be involved in. That's primarily my main role at CppCon. I do some other things. Historically, I've been the person that has printed badges and shaken my fist in anger at the printer when it doesn't do things that I want it to. I am involved in some way in other things. I've been involved in the student program in CppCon, but we have another team that's heading that up this year. But yeah, that's primarily what my role is helping to craft the the talks and the content that you see at the conference.
And the badge printer is fully Unicode compliant?
Oh, I don't want to make any promises we can't keep.
I know that's something you've dealt with.
Yeah, I did just see the badge proofs last night. They're going out to the printer today. They look pretty good this year. It's amazing that badge file a few years ago was it was only a couple hundred pages, and now it's thousands of pages because of just how many attendees we have at the conference.
So is that something you can talk about? How many registered attendees there are?
I don't think I should say, because I don't want to steal John Kalb's thunder, but as always, every year this conference grows, and we
so more than last year.
More definitely, we're looking at more than last year at this point.
So regarding the technical program, so how many submissions did you get, and how many talks were accepted? Like, how big is the conference this year?
So I don't have the exact numbers right in front of me, but we had about 250 submissions or so, and we have accepted about half of them this year.
Okay.
So the program this year, I think we have more talks than we've ever had before, but we also have more half-session talks than we've ever had before. One of the reasons for this is that me and one of the other members of the inter-program committee have sort of been thinking that it might be good to take more talks with a more conservative time budget than to take fewer talks, but give them a little bit more flexibility with time. One of the reasons for this is that we really want to make sure that all of the conference time is used effectively. In the past, we've had, some talks that have ended, our talks that have ended at the 40-minute or 50-minute mark. That's not the most efficient use of our time. If we have a talk that's really going to be 40 minutes, I would rather have that be compressed down to a 30-minute talk than to take up an hour slot. So we, I think, have something like 131 talks that we accepted this year. We only accepted 3 2-hour talks and about, I think, 30 or so 30-minute talks, and the majority of them were 60-minute talks. So it's an accept rate of about 50%. We accept about 50% of the talks, submissions that we get. The number of submissions grows slightly over the years. It has not grown. It does not grow at the same rate that the conference grows. And that's something I would like to improve in the future. I would love to get more submissions. The more submissions that we get, the better quality program we have. So everybody who's thinking about submitting a talk, you definitely should. Speaking at CppCon is an amazing experience.
Yeah.
How often does the conference have to work around schedule changes and things like that? Is that a major problem with speakers having to make changes with you?
It is a large enough problem that we have written scheduling software to we no longer manually build the schedule. We have a system. We put the constraints into the system. Constraints can be a number of things. So first of all, there are constraints based on the tags. So if Jason is giving a talk about parallel algorithms and I'm giving a talk about parallel algorithms, both of those talks will have the same category tag. And that means that the software will try to not schedule them at the same time. Additionally, let's say that Jason could only be at the conference on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Then he would let us know that, and we would put that into the scheduling software, and that's a hard constraint. And Jason might also say,
I'm being really difficult for this conference.
It's for us. We don't view it as being difficult. We want things to be as easy as possible for speakers. Even if it's just something like you're coming from Europe and you're worried you're going to be jet lagged, and you don't want to speak on the first day. That's fine. We can accommodate you as long as we know ahead of time.
I would like to state for the record here that I am actually speaking on Monday and Friday. I did not give all these constraints on these are all hypothetical things that Bryce is talking about, that is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm really excited for both of your talks this year, Jason.
Hopefully they're good. I already had the chance to practice one of them, and the second one, I should probably actually practice it at some point. I don't know. I feel like I've been doing this for a while. I have given like half days of training that I didn't practice, so.
I mean, a lot of times I will sort of do things off the cuff. Personally, I find it a little bit difficult to do a dry run where I don't have another person there, where it's just me, because I find myself always like stopping and then like restarting. So it's just very hard to get through the dry run. And I've been doing it enough that I can usually sort of do it off the cuff if I've gone through my talk a few times.
Yes, I have presented to my dog a couple times. Some people present to a stuffed animal or to the wall or whatever, you know.
To a duck.
Yeah, I like that.
A dog, yeah.
Do you get good questions from your dog?
No, so I add about 10 minutes. I figure if I finish 10 or 15 minutes early because I liked people to ask questions in the middle of the talk, then I'm probably right on time.
Yeah.
So, have all the keynotes and plenaries been announced and put into the schedule? I was trying to look through the schedule right now to figure that out.
I believe they've all been announced, certainly by this point. I think at the very least we've announced all of the names. So we have Bjarna giving a keynote on Monday about concepts, C++20 concepts. And on Tuesday, Kate Gregory is going to be giving a keynote, which I'm very excited about. The title is "What Do We Mean When We Say Nothing at All?" On Wednesday, we have. I'm sorry. That one on Tuesday is not Kate's keynote. On Tuesday we have Mark Elendent from who's one of the developers of the Houdini 3D graphics application, giving a plenary talk. That one should be very cool. This is the fellow who won a Technical Academy Award for some of the work that's used Houdini, and thanked the C++ and the C++ committee on stage. And I saw that video and I was like, that guy, I want that guy. And then Kate Gregory will be giving her keynote on Wednesday. And then Thursday is, I believe Thursday would be Herb Sutter, who I think it's not announced yet what the subject is, but
it says TBA, yeah.
Yeah, we've said that Herb will be giving a keynote, and there's only one slot left, so I can tell you it'll be on Thursday. And then on Friday, Chandler Carruth is going to be giving a keynote about the Spectre security vulnerability and some of the work he's been doing in LLVM to mitigate that. And then there will be a closing panel on Spectre with Chandler, and it is moderated by Matt Godbolt, and with Chandler and two other knowledgeable experts. So I think that should be a very exciting way to end the conference.
Oh, and I didn't realize this. I mean, I was just going over the schedule yesterday. I didn't realize that Chandler's keynote is it's truly the closing keynote. It's the end of the day on Friday, and then the panel starts, it looks like, just shortly after that.
That is very much intentional. We want to encourage everybody to get the full conference experience, which means not leaving in the middle of the day on Friday.
So you are social engineering to keep people around as long as possible.
Yeah, in past years, our Friday content hasn't been as strong because it's ended a little bit earlier, and we wanted to make sure really that Friday was a fully fledged day, that we had strong content on Friday this year, because we really want people to get to feel motivated to come to the full week experience.
Right.
I'd like to interrupt the discussion for just a moment to bring you a word from our sponsors. Authors of the PVS Studio Analyzer suggest downloading and trying the demo version of the product. Link to the distribution package is in the description of this podcast episode. You might not even be aware of the large number of errors and potential vulnerabilities that the PVS Studio Analyzer is able to detect. A good example is the detection of errors that are classed as CWE14 according to the Common Weakness Enumeration. Compiler removal of code to clear buffers. PVS Studio creators demonstrated the detection of such an error type, for example, in one of the latest articles, We Check the Android Source Code by PVS Studio, or Nothing is Perfect. Link to this article is also in the description of this episode. PVS Studio works in Windows, Linux, and macOS environments. The tool supports the analysis of C, C++, and C# code, and Java support is coming soon. Try it today. Another question I have about the schedule is I see that there is an ISO SG14 working meeting on Wednesday. Is that something that anyone could go attend if they're interested?
That's right. There's actually a number of C++ committee meetings around the conference this year. There's two other ones which are not fully open meetings. They're sort of they're people working on a particular problem. So it's just a meeting of those groups of people that are right before the conference. And then there's the SG14 meeting, which is the study group 14, which is a study group exploring the needs of low latency and gaming communities. So that's usually a full day meeting. We've done that for a number of years. I think at least 3 years we've had that meeting at CppCon. I don't remember how many people are there. It's usually a pretty good crowd. If you do want to go, there's a separate registration type on Eventbrite. I believe there's a small fee. I don't recall what it is, but it's nothing outlandish. Anybody.
Eventbrite currently says it is sold out.
Okay. That means that it's up to capacity, and so unfortunately, if you're not already registered, you wouldn't be able to get in. But it is open to anybody, subject to the capacity constraints of the room. You don't need to have any prior experience with the committee, or have been to a committee meeting to attend that particular meeting. Sort of one of the purposes of that meeting is to reach communities that have historically not participated or not been involved in the standardization process, and to try to get them involved. And that's one of the reasons why we do it at a big community conference like this.
And one of the other committee meetings you referenced, I guess that's focused on modules, and I think the other one is the executors. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. There will be a modules meeting before the conference and an executors meeting right before the conference.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason for that is both of those features, we want to be able to advance work on them and make some forward progress on them in between committee meetings. Those are both features that have a lot of dependencies and are very high priority for the committee right now.
Okay.
So
go ahead, Jason.
No, go ahead, Rob, if you were.
I was just going to say, are there any sneak peeks or anything that you can tell us about before the conference next week?
Any sneak peeks?
Things you're not supposed to tell us.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, there's one big thing that I definitely can't say anything about, but there is one big thing.
Ooh, there's a big thing coming up?
Yeah. No, I don't know that there's any particular big exciting surprises. My colleague, Olivier Guiraud, is going to be giving a talk that he and I are very excited about concurrent programming on GPUs. And that's got some cool stuff in there that we'll be very excited to announce and promote. But other than that, I can't really think of anything in particular that's a big secret or surprise that I could tell you about.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll have to wait for anything else that's left.
Yes.
Well, so keeping in mind that this is going to air the Friday before the conference starts on Monday, will there still be time if there's any last-minute people that want to come and buy a ticket?
Oh, yeah, definitely. If you want to come to the conference, we can, even the week of, if you just happen to be in Bellevue and you showed up to the venue and you wanted to to attend the conference, we can sell you a registration ticket. We're not at capacity right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, I guess kind of on the same topic, last year, if I recall, the lightning sessions were open to, and the open content sessions and the lightning sessions were open to anyone, whether or not you were a ticket holder.
That's right. So we have at our conference what we call open content. This is things like lightning talks, birds of a feather session, shorter informal talks. Open content is basically, it's any sort of technical content that gets presented at time slots in between the regular program. So oftentimes they're not the most optimal time slots, like they might be during lunch or like in the evening. But it's a great way to present content that's not not the right fit for the technical program or something that's like a new and different format. And open content is something that anybody can come to. And I should mention also, it's not only a question of can I register for the conference late. If you're already coming to the conference, you might be able to get into one of the classes. So if you happen to be coming to CppCon and you're going to be there the weekend before, the weekend after, and you haven't registered for a class, you should go check out the classes. We have some really great instructors, including this Jason Turner guy. And I believe at least some of the classes are not sold out yet. So the classes are really great. I sit in on some of them every year. I'm always impressed by the quality of the presenters. They pour a lot of effort into preparing their classes, and I think it's a really great learning experience.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there are still seats available in my class if anyone wants to sign up in the weekend after the conference, as Bryce mentioned.
Yeah, I sat in on Jason's class last year, and I really enjoyed it. It was I even learned some stuff.
Yeah, I feel like you spent a lot of time there. I'm like, wow, doesn't he have anything else to do? No, I'm just kidding. Hopefully that meant you did actually like it. So
definitely.
So what talks are you going to be giving at CppCon this year yourself?
I'm going to be giving, my talk is called the C++ Execution Model. And it's an interesting talk. If you sort of read the talk description, you might think that it's like a talk about C++ atomics or the C++ memory model. It is sort of adjacent to that topic, but what I really want to talk about is a particular part of the standard and a particular part of the abstract machine that deals with like what is actually execution? What does it mean to evaluate a function? What is a thread? Just what are these very basic building blocks of the language? And the reason I wanted to give this talk is I sort of want to introduce people outside of the committee to some of the theoretical basis upon which a lot of the language stands, and a lot of the concurrency and parallelism features in C++ stands. So I want people to come away from this talk understanding what it means to evaluate a function, what a thread of execution is, what an execution agent is, what progress guarantees are, so that people are armed with knowledge of all of these terms that you often hear about from the various concurrency and parallelism experts. But it's very much focused on the execution aspect of things, not so much the memory model aspect of things.
And this started as a lightning talk.
This did start as a lightning talk at C++ Now, and I've taken that content and I've expanded it out a bit. It's still the basic, the same basic content that I had at C++ Now, but with a lot more examples and sort of in-depth, like walking through in depth what a particular thing means.
Okay.
And there's a couple new parts to it that were not in the C++ Now talk.
I was going to say, it sounds like an awful lot of content to have tried to fit into 5 minutes.
It was an awful lot of content to try to fit in 5 minutes. I still claim that those 5 minutes, I did my job of delivering the essentials that you needed to know.
Something tells me you were actually on stage for 5 minutes and 30 seconds, and Michael had to pull you off.
He's pretty strict, actually. He keeps you on schedule.
I did not go to the lightning talks that day. At least if I did, I don't remember your talk, so I'm pretty sure I didn't go.
So I wanted to rewind a little bit back to the Rappers Will C++ committee meeting over the summer, and ask about what your thoughts were on the 2D graphics proposal. That was kind of a big discussion point at that meeting, right?
Yes, one of the reasons it was a discussion point was that I wrote a paper with some co-authors on the subject. And the basic gist of my paper was suggesting that the 2D graphics library, or I think of it more of a 2D drawing library, might not be a good fit for the standard library. We've been working on solving this problem since 2013, when there was first an initiative to try to explore this space. And at that time, we said, the original paper that started that initiative said, this is a new thing. We haven't really done anything like this before. We're not sure whether we'll be able to do it. We're gonna try. If we haven't solved this in 2 years or so, if we haven't solved this in 2 years or so, maybe it's just not something that we have the capability of solving. And that was in 2013, and we've been working on it up until now. And there's been a lot of great work done on the library by Guy Davidson and Michael McLaughlin. But I think there's sort of two issues that I have with it fundamentally. The first is that I think the current form of the library is not suitable to ship. There's too many technical issues with it right now, and it will take a lot of work to get it to a point where we could ship it even as a TS. And secondly, I'm not sure that there's a use case and a demand for this feature. I'm not sure that this is something that we should be investing the time in. So there's one, it needs an investment of time if we're going to standardize this. But two, it's not clear whether it's the right thing to invest in right now. And so on a technical level, the library's design is based on Cairo, which is sort of a 2D graphics library designed in an earlier era. Modern 2D graphics is very different modern 2D graphic libraries tend to be very different than something like Cairo. They're based on vector graphics and sort of path rendering style APIs. And they often have fully batched APIs so that you can implement an efficient GPU accelerated implementation of the library. The current design that we have, one, it's a very large proposal. It's got a lot of duplication of things already in the standard library, and two, it's designed in such a way that will inhibit an efficient implementation and isn't reflective of best practices in modern 2D graphics. And I don't really think it satisfies the use cases that it was designed for. One of the reasons that we want a 2D graphics library is to help improve the teachability of the language, to make it easier for new people to write simple programs and see the results of those programs. Instead of just writing something that prints out "Hello World," being able to make a window or make some simple, game or something like that. But the issue is that the 2D graphics proposal that we have, it's not so much a 2D graphics proposal as it is a 2D drawing library. It gives you a way to programmatically draw on the screen. But that's not what I think we need. What I think we need is a simple way to create windows, to put assets like sprites onto the screen and manipulate them. And that's sort of also one of the areas where the proposal is lacking. There's not really a clear, good way to get a true window, or to get a native handle to a window. So I'm not sure that it actually satisfies the use case. The library as it is, it's a programmatic drawing library, which is fine if you want that. But I don't know that it serves new users or educators particularly well. And there's a lot of limitations to the library. It doesn't have a text library. One of the examples in the proposal is an example of how to display C++, the words, the letters C++ on the screen. And the way you do it with this library is you programmatically draw each one of the characters, because there's no text rendering component to the library, because we don't have a text library in C++ yet. We have a study group that's working on that, but we don't have a solution there yet. And the library also has a linear algebra library that's very specifically oriented for 2D graphics. And that's fine, but maybe we should focus on standardizing a general purpose 2D linear algebra and geometry types first, and sort of focus on the building blocks that we need for a 2D graphics library, like text and linear algebra and geometry first.
So if I understand understand you correctly, you don't have a specific proposal that you would like to replace it with. You just don't think this is the right time and the right place for this proposal.
Yes, I think that's right. We suggested an alternate design that was based on a path rendering model where you had a stood window, so you had some portable way of getting a window and a native handle to that window, which would be of use to people who are actually professional graphics programmers. Usually you solve that today with some library like Glut. And then you have this stood asset class, and a stood asset could be something like a raster image file, like some PNG file or JPEG file, or it could be an SVG path, which describes some vector shape. And then some ways to manipulate your assets, to put them in the window and then manipulate them, and some callback APIs for handling drawing, and we sort of sketched out a rough idea of what a more minimal proposal would look like that would satisfy the use cases that we have for a graphics library. But I think that doesn't mean that we feel that this is the right time to standardize a graphics library.
Okay.
As you said, obviously we feel bad about the amount of work that Michael McLaughlin and Guy Davidson and others put into the library for it to not be standardized. But what do you see as kind of the path forward? I know, we had Guy Davidson on about 2 months ago when he talked about how the British Standards Group is still publishing the paper. Do you see that it might still make it into C++ standards sometime at some point in the future? Or what do you see as the,
So it looks like there will probably be some continued discussion of the proposal at the next committee meeting. I think some people would like to see it shipped as a technical specification that we don't have plans to merge into the international standard, sort of similar to the transactional memory TS. So the future course is not, I think, completely decided yet. We're gonna revisit the conversation at the next meeting. Personally, I think that the answer here I think that this is a symptom of a larger problem, and that larger problem is C++ lacks a package story. Many other languages have a package story. It's, some fundamental component in their language that provides either a package metadata format or a full-fledged packaging system that users of that language can use to get libraries that are not part of the language itself or not part of the standard itself, but can be easily accessed with any implementation of the language from some common repositories or well-known repositories. And I think if we have that, if in C++ there was an easy way for me to get a 2D graphics library that wasn't part of the standard, for me to get started using that just by, adding some line to my source file or something like that, if there was an easy way for me to do that, then maybe we wouldn't need to put something like a graphics library into the standard library, because it would be fine for it to just be a package that was in your C++ implementation's package repository. So I think the biggest challenge we have to solve in C++ in the next 5 to 10 years is coming up with a packaging story. I don't know what that will look like. Because there are multiple implementations of C++, I can't imagine that we would solve this in the same way that other languages would. It might be that instead of standardizing, a particular packaging system, we standardize a package metadata system. I certainly imagine that your C++ implementation is probably going to be the provider of any default repositories. It's not clear exactly what we want to do in this space, but I think we have to figure out a story. It needs to be easier for C++ users to use third-party libraries. It's too hard today. We got to solve this problem.
Well, the good news is we now have the tooling study group to hopefully look into this problem and hopefully find a good solution for it, right?
Yep, and I know there's a lot of people in the packaging and the related build system world that are now, I think, encouraged to come to the committee with ideas about what we can do in these spaces. Build systems are a separate problem and discussion, but obviously it's related. Once you have some way of discovering packages, there's still a question of how do you build them.
Right.
Well, Bryce, is there anything else you wanted to go over before we let you go?
No, nothing I can think of. If you're not coming to CppCon, why aren't you coming to CppCon? There's still time to register. And if you are coming to CppCon, I strongly encourage you to think about giving a lightning talk. I do have one thing we can close on, which is recently an attendee asked me for some tips for first-time attendees, and I came up with these 4. The first one is no regrets. So when you're at a big tech conference like CppCon, you should try to not have any regrets. A big tech conference like CppCon has a ton of content, a ton of things going on. You're not going to be able to do everything, and that's perfectly fine. You don't have to try to do everything. A lot of the main content will be recorded, so you can watch it later. And I think if you try to focus too much on building the optimal schedule or making sure that you get to every talk you wanted to see, you might miss out on some of the impromptu social aspects of the conference. So I think that you should just enjoy the experience that you're having at the conference. Don't worry too much about getting to do everything that you plan to do. Just let the experience that you're having be what it is, and enjoy whatever the experience is that you're having. And if you feel overwhelmed, you gotta. It's all right to go and take a break. You don't have to do everything. The second thing is that I really think the best part of the conference is not what's on the schedule. It's the hallway conversations, the group meals, the informal chats, the impromptu discussions. I think those are incredibly valuable to me. I hear from other people all the time that that's one of the most valuable parts of the conference for them. So I strongly encourage you to not just go to the talks, but also to engage with the community in the time in between the talks. And then the third thing is be confused. There's a lot of intermediate to advanced content at a conference like CppCon, and if you ever feel like you're in over your head, don't worry. Everybody's in over their head. Even if you feel like you're not getting something, that doesn't mean that you don't belong there. As long as you care about C++, you belong at CppCon. And we all there's things that all of us find confusing or struggle to understand. And that's sort of part of why you go to the conference, is to learn new things, is to be challenged. So no one's truly an expert. We're all there to learn. And so I don't judge yourself too harshly if there's stuff that you find confusing. And my last thing is be bold. If you want to, ask a speaker a question or want to talk to somebody who's a prominent figure in the community, you should just do it, because everybody in our community is really approachable and friendly. And everybody's very welcoming. It's perfectly fine for you to go up to Jason or Bjarna or Herb or Rob and just, ask them a question that you had. And I think you'll find that everybody will, nobody's gonna judge you because you're new or because they don't know who you are. They're going to be welcoming and friendly. So you should be bold, and you should go and talk to the people you want to talk to and ask the questions you want to ask.
It's great advice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on the show again today, Bryce.
Yeah, it was great to be here, guys, and I'll see you in Seattle.
See you next week.
Thanks so much for listening in as we chat about C++. We'd love to hear what you think of the podcast. Please let us know if we're discussing the stuff you're interested in, or if you have a suggestion for a topic, we'd love to hear about that too. You can email all your thoughts to feedback@cppcast.com. We'd also appreciate if you can like CppCast on Facebook and follow CppCast on Twitter. You can also follow me at Rob W. Irving and Jason at Lefticus on Twitter. We'd also like to thank all our patrons who help support the show through Patreon. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, you can do so at patreon.com/CppCast. And of course, you can find all that info and the show notes on the podcast website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode was provided by podcastthemes.com. Website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode was provided by podcastthemes.com.